Hey, good afternoon to you. It is now 5:06 News Talk 105.9 WMAL, where we are making sense of the news. You can join us today at 888-630-9625, 888-630-WMAL. Ahead, I've got some great audio for you. One of the president's top advisors, Stephen Miller, just absolutely wiping the floor with the legacy media today on what is happening with all of this illegal immigration, what is happening with the federal workforce. It's great. It's all ahead. But joining us right now is Andrew Arthur. He's a resident fellow in law and policy for the Center for Immigration Studies. And we're going to take a deeper dive now into so-called birthright citizenship and the fact that illegal aliens and tourists from China can come to the United States, have a baby, and then have an American citizen right away. Art, good to have you with us, sir.
Vince, thanks so much for having me again. Truly appreciate it.
Always love talking to you. And today, the reason we're chatting is because I know you've got some new data on just how big of a deal this is. How many, when illegal aliens are here, how many American citizens are being produced in those families each year?
So the center did a rough estimate of the number of U.S. births in 2023 to illegal alien parents, and we determined that 7% of all births that year, between 225,000 and 250,000 in total, were to parents who were unlawfully present in the United States. So it's a massive, it's a shocking number, honestly.
A
And
quarter
quite
million.
frankly, Vince, a quarter million, yeah, and I think it's only going to get worse because we know that more than 1 million migrants entered in what are called family units. That's when, adults enter with children, and a lot of those adults enter together. It's a couple with their kid. They get released in the United States. About 88.5% of all migrants were, slightly higher for those family units. So those folks are now living in the United States, building up equities, and one of those equities is United States citizen children. So, that just gives you an idea of how tough the task that
Yes.
Tom Homan and Stephen Miller have ahead of them.
So how is it, give us a better sense of this. How is it an equity to have a U.S. citizen child? What benefit does that provide to the illegal immigrant parents of that child?
So when it comes to things like prosecutorial discretion, bringing the case at all, or for any form of discretionary relief, and asylum is a form of discretionary relief, those equities count in the alien's favor when it comes time for the judge or the government to make a determination. So, if they have a job, if they own a house, if they have a kid, all of those things are positive equities that count in the alien's favor.
So, meaning that we have traditionally, when this situation arises, judges typically err on the side of, well, let's not deport the parents because we have a U.S. citizen child involved, so let's try and figure out a way to make this good for the child.
Yeah, that's exactly how it goes. But keep in mind at the same time, Vince, that, Congress has also written a law so that, we anticipate that people are going to have kids here. That is one of the normal consequences of removal, that, if you get removed and you've, had a child in the United States, that's going to happen. So it is sort of a weak equity, but it's still a significant equity that you have to take into account in a closed case.
So when we use the term anchor baby, this is precisely what we're referring to.
Yeah, so when people refer to anchor babies, what they're talking about is, and it's not a term I use, but it is, one that people are familiar with.
Right.
They are talking about, having a child in the United States so that, one, it's an equity in case of removal, but, more importantly, when that child turns 21, that child can then petition for the parents to come to the United States. And from that point, we can petition for more, extended family, up to and including nieces and nephews.
Yes.
To come into the United States.
So,
it's a huge issue.
Art, is there ever a time where where you've got a situation like this and an immigration judge looks at it and says, well, yeah, there's a U.S. citizen child who was born here after they illegally immigrated, but I am going to deport the parents. I'm going to deport the whole family. And if the kid, when they're of age, when they're an adult, wants to come back, they're welcome to as a U.S. citizen. Does that ever happen?
Yeah, actually, in fact, Vince, there's an entire body of case law that surrounds exactly that. And, the attitude that case law, that precedent has is you have a choice. You can take that child with you, but if you claim that you're going to leave the child here, you also need to tell me who's going to take care of that child when you're removed.
Right.
So that's the way that it comes down. It's a pretty logical system. Immigration is generally logical when you enforce the law.
Yes. Okay. And so now President Trump has issued a controversial executive order dictating that he doesn't believe that the 14th Amendment was ever intended to be used in this way. And as we've been looking at it, he's not removing anybody's citizenship, but his goal is to say going forward that you can't just be an illegal immigrant and then suddenly give birth to an American citizen. Isn't that right?
Yeah, so the way that this order works is 30 days from the issuance of the order, and I think that's February the 16th or 18th, something like that. But 30 days from the issuance of the order, Social Security Administration, DOS, other agencies of the federal government are going to stop issuing documents showing that that individual is a United States citizen. So that child wouldn't get a social security number, wouldn't get a passport, things like that.
Yes.
That's the effective part of this. But the real reason, and nobody's told me this, but it's pretty clear from the order, they want to trigger the legal challenges, and there are 5 of them, currently going on in the courts to this order, because they want the Supreme Court to weigh in on the intent of the 14th Amendment, which states any person born or naturalized in the United States and subject to the jurisdiction thereof is a citizen of the United States. And they really want to get that part, subject to the jurisdiction thereof, interpreted. The last case that, actually weighed in on the issue was in 1898. So, but, people may say, well, it's been, 126 years. Why are you revisiting the question now? And the reason is because of, the millions of people, the 10 million people who have entered the United States, under the Biden administration. This is, now a much larger issue than it was, back in the 90s when I started my immigration career, when almost everybody who came to the United States illegally was a single adult male from Mexico, and most of them were just turned around and sent back. This is a very different world. And when you talk about, 1.5 million aliens and family units, who were apprehended at the border and released into the United States, we're talking about, potentially 500,000 children,
Yes.
6 or 7 years down the road that this may apply to. So it's better for the courts to actually weigh in on this now.
Right.
But in order to do that, they need a case or controversy.
So
and they're triggering that.
As you point out and know much better than I do, this is an area that is largely untested before the United States Supreme Court. In other words, there's a lot of space for interpretation as to how the 14th Amendment applies here. And if I understand correctly, that case you're referring to in 1898, United States versus Wong Kim Ark, it didn't involve someone who was here illegally, did it?
No, it involved a person who was the child of 2 19th century versions of green card holders, 2 permanent residents of the United States. And he was a Chinese national. He was born in San Francisco. He went to China. When he came back, they attempted to exclude him. And the justices of the Supreme Court, as a 5-4 decision, held that, he was, in fact, a citizen of the United States under the 14th Amendment. They actually went further than just that case. They said everybody, with the exception of specific Native Americans who was born here, were citizens. And in fact, in 1924, Congress passed the Indian Citizenship Act to address those people. But yeah. So the holding was much broader than the facts of the case, and in the law we refer to that as dicta. So that key part that everybody else who's born here, other than the kids of diplomats, are citizens, and the Indians, of course, are citizens. It's not actually valid law. I mean, it's the law,
yes,
but it is one that is subject to revisiting, which again is what the Trump administration is attempting.
And it seems like a pretty perverse way to interpret the intent of the 14th Amendment. The 14th Amendment was was very famously passed in the wake of slavery, and it was designed to ensure that freed slaves, black Americans, were considered American citizens. That's the point of the 14th Amendment. It's not for Chinese foreign nationals to come here on a tourist visa, have a baby, and an American citizen by extension, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And you bring up a very important point on that. You can come to the United States on a tourist visa in order to get medical treatment. If that medical treatment is, I'm pregnant and I'm going to give birth, is it appropriate to issue a visa to that person to come to the United States knowing that the child is going to be a United States citizen? because the whole idea behind non-immigrant status and B2, a tourist visa is non-immigrant status, is that you're not planning on staying in the United States. You're planning on going back home to your unrelinquished domicile. So, this touches many different aspects of the law. But yes, in the when this was passed in 1868, it was to reverse the Dred Scott case, and it followed up on an earlier provision in the Civil Rights Act of 1866, which was written a little bit differently, but not, during floor debates, it wasn't supposed to be read differently. And that one said all persons born in the United States and not subject to any foreign power, excluding Indians not taxed, are hereby declared to be citizens of the United States. So that is a little bit clearer on exactly the scenario you gave me. Those people are subject to a foreign power. People who come here illegally are subject to a foreign power. So that's really the delta, and whether, Congress intended a change between 1866 and 1868, what that clause, that critical clause in the 14th Amendment means, that's really open for discussion.
Yes, and if we go back to the drafters of the 14th Amendment, even the authors were pretty clear, weren't they, about what they intended to do with this idea of birthright citizenship?
Yeah, and it's interesting because if we were to go back then and say, oh, by the way, there are 15 million illegal aliens in the United States, they would be gobstruck. Those are concepts that they couldn't really even understand. So and I'm sure that if they could, they probably would have addressed it a little bit more clearly than they had. We really didn't have large-scale legal immigration in the United States until truly the 21st century. Yes. After we started cracking down. As recently as 2007, 90+% of all the people who were stopped at the southwest border were single adult males from Mexico coming to work, and if they got caught and turned around, they were just going to enter illegally anyway.
Yes, I know. It's so funny. I was just talking to a lefty the other day. He was like, Vince, why is Trump trying to change the interpretation of the 14th Amendment? I said, he's trying to restore it. He's trying to restore our understanding of the 14th Amendment. This is a big deal, and we should do it. At any rate, thank you for digging into the numbers. I can't even believe that 2023, 250,000 U.S. babies born to illegal aliens, according to Center for Immigration Studies data. That's a lot of people. Andrew Arthur, good to talk to you today, sir. All right, let's see. I've got Mike in Gainesville, line 5. Hello, Mike. You're on the Vince Coglianese Show. Mr. Mike, you there? Check 1 2. All right, no Mike. All right, let's see. I've got Sarah calling in from Fairfax Station, line 6. Hello, Sarah. You're on the Vince Coglianese Show.
Hi, Vince. I think there's a very simple, extreme but simple question that could reveal to us the answer to the constitutional issue about immigration. Mm-hmm. If we were occupied by a foreign conquering force for 12, 24, 36 months, do they get citizenship status?
Do
really
all of the babies of the occupiers, do they become American citizens after we defeat them in combat and we're assessing what we do with everybody who was born here to the occupying force? No, they would not be American citizens. I think you're right about that, Sarah.
And I think the same rule should apply to a different kind of occupying non-military force.
Yeah, when foreign nationals pour into the country illegally and then have babies here, it just doesn't make rational sense. To your point, it doesn't make any coherent sense. No other country on the planet does it like this. We do, because it's idiotic, but it doesn't mean that we have to keep doing it, which is why the President Trump is trying to tackle this. And we saw this judge, a judge tried to intervene a couple days ago and block all of this. But that's exactly what you heard Art talk about this a moment ago. That's what the Trump administration wants. They want the left to freak out and to try and litigate this, because what we want is for this to go before the United States Supreme Court so we can once and for all fix this insane problem that we've got going on, which is an incoherent and unconstitutional system by which people become American citizens.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Thank you, Sarah. I appreciate your call on that. It looks like Mike in Gainesville is back. He dialed back in on line 5. Mike, good afternoon, sir. You're on the Vince Coglianese Show.
Hey, Vince Coglianese. Sorry that I missed you. I was detained. But I just wanted to say the 14th Amendment was not designed by the framers to create dual citizens at birth. the freed slaves had no nationality because they'd been here for 5 generations. Their home country didn't recognize them as citizens back home anymore. So we had to give them citizenship here to get past the Dred Scott.
Well, most of the slaves were born here. Almost, very few slaves actually in the United States were direct from Africa, came over on the transatlantic slave trade. Most of them were descendants of the people who were brought over, and they're Americans. And the 14th Amendment straight up said, yes, they're American citizens, overturning, as you point out, as Art just pointed out, the Dred Scott decision.
Right, but we're looking at it backwards. In other words, just being born here before the 14th Amendment was passed really didn't make anybody automatically a citizen in anybody's mind. Everybody always questioned who their parents were. It was the 14th Amendment that gave everybody the signal that, no, just being born here is sufficient to be a citizen. It doesn't make you a natural citizen. It just makes you a automatically naturalized citizen for having been born here. And we're getting around to that argument now, but nobody's been thinking along those lines until now. Except for a few of us.
A couple. John Eastman has been out there fighting, keeping this alive. Yeah, no, it's an important issue, and thankfully President Trump, the first president of our lifetimes, coming at this and going, wait a second, this is insane what we're doing. And the 14th Amendment, to your point, Mike, to my point, it was literally designed to ensure citizenship for former slaves. That's why it came into being. It's amazing. And, of course, the left, just like everything else, perverted it into something unrecognizable. Hey, coming up, we've got great audio. Stephen Miller goes on CNN today and totally outclasses the host. Unbelievable. Not that unbelievable, actually. It's great. I wonder how often CNN's going to invite him back. I'll share that with you next. All right, it's 5:35 now, WMAL. You can join us today, 888-630-9625, 888-630-WMAL. Boy, do I have a lot to share with you. So here's the state of play. We had an announcement overnight that President Trump's administration was putting a freeze on federal loans and grants and all of this money that's been given away to all of these insane, under the cover of darkness, Marxist operations, ridiculous spending programs. We're talking trillions and trillions of dollars. The Trump administration said, all right, everybody, freeze. We're not sending more American taxpayer money out the door until we get a chance to assess how we're spending this money, what we're even spending it on, whether or not it serves the American people. This is exactly what American voters want. Exactly. But it's not what Washington wants. So the fight is on. Now, in the midst of all of this, you should know that there are a lot of lies being told by the media today about this funding freeze. The funding freeze does not affect any direct federal payments. It doesn't affect Medicare. It doesn't affect Medicaid. It doesn't affect Social Security. But you know that every great scandal in Washington, every great hoax usually begins with them telling you that those payments are being imperiled. They're cutting off Social Security. No such thing. It's a lie. Now, Caroline Leavitt, the White House press secretary today, did say that for some reason the Medicaid portal, that is the online website, was down today. There was an outage that they were looking into to resolve and get it back up online. But it has apparently no relationship to this freeze on federal funding for these stupid Marxist projects that the federal government funds. That said, I am suspicious. I'd like to know more about this Medicaid portal. I'd like to know how it went down and who took it down, because this reminds me a lot of another like hoaxy scandal from the last week. Remember, President Trump orders the purging of all of the DEI racial prejudice from the federal government, and some idiot in the Air Force decided that meant that nobody's allowed to learn about the Tuskegee Airmen anymore, and they started pulling videos down. Oh, you can't learn about the Tuskegee Airmen. What? What does that have to do with purging bigotry from the government? So what that was, according to some congresswoman used this phrase. I've used it in the past too. They called it malicious compliance. Malicious compliance. Isn't that a wonderful phrase? They're pretending like they're fulfilling the spirit of the law or the rule, but doing it in a way to create maximum damage. Malicious compliance. And actually, they weren't. They were taking down something that had value in order to hurt people and to theatrically blame Donald Trump for hurting the American people, getting rid of videos about the Tuskegee Airmen. That's crazy. And that's some lefty who's trying to sabotage Trump's agenda. And so I wonder about this Medicaid website going offline for a time today and whether or not it's the same thing. Oh, I thought we had to freeze all of our federal programs. Oh, sorry, I didn't understand what you meant. Fire that person and then charge them with something. It's insane. All right. So that brings us to the last hour. You may have heard Barbara mention it a moment ago. A U.S. judge today, Reuters reporting here, has temporarily paused part of the Trump administration's sweeping directive to pause federal loans, grants, and other financial assistance, granting a win to advocacy groups who said that the policy would be devastating. At a hearing in Washington, D.C., federal court, U.S. District Judge Lauren Ali Khan ordered the Trump administration not to block open awards or funds that were already slated to be dispersed until at least February 3rd. Okay, so this D.C. judge getting in the way of the president being a good steward of our money right now. Now, a little bit ago, Stephen Miller, one of the senior aides to President Trump, a guy who served the country well in President Trump's first term and once again now in his second, was on CNN, and they were talking about getting control of all of this spending and the federal workforce. Stephen Miller was on with Jake Tapper, and listen to how Miller handles Jake.
And I want to really drill down on this, Jake, because it's so important. Mm-hmm. There's 2 million employees in the federal government. Overwhelmingly, the career federal service in this country is far left wing. I don't know that to be a fact. Well, I'll give you a great example. We looked at USAID as an example. That's 98% of the workforce either donated to Kamala Harris or another left-wing candidate, just as an example. Okay, but let me just an entire workforce is having a whoa. Did you just say that saying someone voted for Kamala Harris is demonizing them? No. So according your suggestion is that there's a bias. No. But you used the word demonizing. You just said that I'm demonizing somebody by saying they voted for Kamala Harris. Let's get back on track. But I am on track. Okay. Let me stay on track. What I'm saying to you is this. There are 2 million employees in the federal government. Right. They're overwhelmingly left of center. The American people, I got to finish the sentence. Okay. I got to finish the sentence. The American people voted for dramatic change implemented by Donald Trump. So it is essential for him to get control of government, to establish a whole of government process for Donald Trump's political appointees to review discretionary grants of spending for pet projects that are not directed by Congress. In other words, these are pots of money where Congress hasn't said how to spend it or where to spend it. This might be something like saying, I want to build a $500 million fountain in the courtyard of the Department of Commerce. This might be...
Yeah, okay, so look, so here you have Stephen Miller just dog walking Jake Tapper. Come here, boy. Like, just here, let me guide you. I will take you through this. And Tapper's like totally stunned by it. And I love that he caught him specifically, that Stephen Miller catches Tapper, because Tapper says, Miller's like, yeah, 98% of all the USAID donations, the people who work for USAID, 98% of their donations went to Kamala Harris or other assorted left-wing causes. And Tapper goes, oh, now you're demonizing them. And Miller's like, wait a second. So it's demonizing to say that someone voted for a Democrat? I mean, that'd be pretty great if we arrived at the level that it's now pejorative to say that you've donated to a Democrat. You should hang your head in shame that you voted for a Democrat. Tapper saying, you're demonizing these people by saying they supported a Democrat. Miller laughing, getting a well-deserved laugh out of that moment. Now, here's another portion of this. So Stephen Miller was talking about illegal aliens in the country. And Jake Tapper starts bringing up this idea, the left loves doing this. So they say something like, well, if you start deporting illegals, who's going to pick our crops? Who's going to pick our crops? Which is a very elitist attitude to bring to these conversations. Who's going to be my underpaid servant if we deport all of the illegals? And if you're going to debate Stephen Miller on anything, if you're going to and hope to prevail in that debate, don't pick immigration. That is the wrong topic to debate Stephen Miller on. If there is one topic that this man has been singularly focused on, it is the ins and outs of immigration policy and the effect that all of that has on the United States of America. Here's Tapper attempting this today with Stephen Miller.
Jobs many Americans do not want to do. So how does President Trump make sure that the effort to deport people who are not in this country legally doesn't end up hurting Americans who want safe borders, absolutely, but also don't want to see even more higher prices in groceries.
Well, I mean, I'm sure it's not your position, Jake, you're just asking the question, that we should supply America's food with exploitative illegal alien labor. I obviously don't think that's what you're implying. Only 1% of alien workers in the entire country work in agriculture. The top destination for illegal aliens are large cities like New York, like Los Angeles.
Dwell on that point, please. Just to be clear on the data point that he just gave us, 1% of illegal alien labor in the country works in agriculture. 1%. How often is that number wielded by CNN? In fact, actually, it's the complete inverse usually. Usually what they suggest, and this is like you go to The View and Anna Navarro and Sonny Hostin and Whoopi Goldberg, who's going to pick all my food? Who's going to pick the vegetables? Who's going to do all what the phrase is stoop labor, bending down and picking everything up, if not these illegal aliens who we are exploiting by underpaying them at the expense of both them and American workers? Who's going to do all this? And Miller says, wait a second, let me be clear about the data here. 1% of such illegal alien labor is in agriculture.
Obviously, don't think that's what you're implying. Only 1% of alien workers in the entire country work in agriculture. The top destination for illegal aliens are large cities like New York, like Los Angeles, and small industrial towns, of course, all across the heartland, as we've seen with the Biden floods. Mm-hmm. None of those illegal aliens are doing farm work. Those 30,000 illegal aliens that Joe Biden dumped into Springfield.
I'm talking about the ones that are.
But I'm explaining this. It's important to understand.
No, you're kind of changing the subject.
By the way, we also have legal guest worker programs that we use to bring in foreigners to do agricultural work. That is actually built into our system.
I'm talking about the ones.
I will give me 30 minutes. I'll go as deep as you want this.
We don't have 30
your
minutes.
Audience.
I don't have a third. I'm talking about the ones that work in the agriculture industry.
I'm
you can come back and we can talk about the ones in the cities. I swear.
I'll do the whole answer. The illegal aliens that Joe Biden brought into our country are not full stop doing farm work. They are not. The illegal aliens he brought in from Venezuela, from Haiti, from Nicaragua, they are not doing farm work. They are in our cities collecting welfare. As for the farmers, there is a guest worker program that President Trump supports. Over time as well, we will transition into automation, so we'll never have to have this conversation ever again. But there's no universe in which this nation is going to allow the previous president.
There's a reason that you haven't seen Stephen Miller a lot on television. There's a reason. And my guess is you're probably not. I mean, I guess we'll see what CNN does with this. Maybe that segment rated well, and they're going to want to bring him back for round 2, or Jake Tapper's going to go back and do his homework and feel like, I can take him this time. I'll have something. I'll be able to square him away. I don't know. We'll see. But I have a feeling that this isn't just Stephen Miller's choice that he's decided to opt out of all these networks all the time. I don't think they can handle him. Because the end result is that they're not trying to present news and information. They want to dominate Stephen Miller. They want him to come on. They want to embarrass him. They want to scandalize the Trump administration. That's the goal of these segments. It's not to inform the public. And as soon as Miller was getting the better of Jake in this segment, what did Jake do? Well, let's not derail it. Let's not derail the conversation, he says. Amazing. And so this is, I'll just let this clip finish up. This is, again, Stephen Miller explaining what you're talking about has nothing to do. Agricultural workers, this has nothing to do with the massive problem our country is now facing as a result of Joe Biden.
This conversation ever again. But there's no universe in which this nation is going to allow the previous president to flood our nation with millions and millions of illegal aliens who just get to stay here. And we are especially not going to allow a subset of those illegal aliens to rape and murder our citizens. So we are going to unapologetically enforce our immigration laws, and as I'm sure you will celebrate, we are going to unleash the power and might of the U.S. government to eradicate the presence of transnational threats on our soil.
I'll take more of that, please. I'll take a lot more of that. And, what CNN should be doing, like if this was an authentic news network that was genuinely interested in getting to the bottom of all this, they'd be doing a segment right now about why did Joe Biden sell us out? Why did Joe Biden sell us out? Why is it that the Trump administration has access to lists of thousands upon thousands of violent criminals who are here roaming our streets freely? Why do they know that immediately upon arriving in office? And the answer is because the Biden administration knew this. The federal government knew this and continued to let everybody run free and cause chaos and kill people like Laken Riley. That's what happened. And so if there's a newsworthy scandal here, it's to cover up the cover up by the Democrats. Good for Stephen Miller. And I didn't realize that 1% of alien workers in the United States in agriculture. I didn't know that data point. Really, really goes to show you how absurd The View and in this case Jake Tapper are when they talk about this subject. Who's going to cut my flowers? Who's going to pick my food? Who's going to clean my house? They screech. Meanwhile, the rest of us are asking, who's going to make my neighborhood safe? Who's going to look out for my kids? Who's going to look out for my family? Who's going to look out for America? Who's going to protect what it means to be an American citizen, not water it down, not give it away, not treat it as if it's throwaway? Fascinating. And now and yet another judge, as I mentioned, jumping out in front of the Trump administration today to try and stop Donald Trump, President Trump, from being a good steward of the American people's resources. President Trump freezing all of these ridiculous programs that are in his purview to decide how the money is spent. You heard Stephen Miller just mention it a moment ago. This is not Congress saying money has to be spent on this particular thing. It's Congress handing over to these agencies these massive blocks of grants, which have been distributed in insane and unaccountable ways. President Trump is trying to give this whole system, I've seen these estimates here, something like $3 trillion in spending, some accountability, and saying, no, we're not doing that. We're going to stop it right now. We'll assess every dollar, and then if you're deserving, you'll get money. And if you're not, we're going to save the American taxpayer. I can hope he can prevail against these crazy left-wing judges. You know, I'm not tired of it. President Trump this hour has signed an executive order protecting kids from so-called transgender procedures and surgeries. Quote, it is the policy of the United States that it will not fund, sponsor, promote, assist, or support the so-called transition of a child from one sex to another, and it will rigorously enforce all laws that prohibit or limit these destructive and life-altering procedures. Wonderful news, and unfortunate that it even has to come to pass, isn't it? That the President of the United States has to pass an executive order, has to sign an executive order banning child abuse? What is the world coming to? Last week, he signed an executive order establishing that there are two genders, male and female. The executive orders he's passing are recognitions of reality, a return to some decency. A declaration by President Trump today that children should not be abused in America, an executive order to that effect, and an attempt to prevent all this federal funding from further going to abusing children. It's so long overdue. Wonderful to see. All right. We've got some big confirmation hearings coming. Really big. RFK Jr. tomorrow. Tulsi Gabbard coming on Thursday. We've got Kash Patel this week. Boy, we need an FBI director. That's right, Thursday, Kash as well. In other words, we'll be covering all of it right here on WMAL. The great one, Mark Levin, and his reaction to all of the day's news. That's ahead right here on WMAL.